Good morning, Jennifer Brown.
Good morning, Jen Grace. How are you? Happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday indeed. I feel like I'm energized. I have a lot of energy this morning, and I'm really excited for the conversation that we are about to have with Dr. Maysa Akbar. Hey, Maysa.
Hi.
Hey, congrats on, it's a big day today. Tell us more about it.
Oh my gosh, such a big day. You both know you're both authors, and it doesn't get old, right? Like when this day comes, this morning, my husband was like, "So how do you feel?" And I was like, so yeah, anticlimactic, and I feel this way." He was like, "Okay, like 2 sentences," because I was going on. But it's an amazing feeling because it's like you've been working on this piece for so long. The editing process is so painful, and you want to have it be just the most perfect, craft, a perfect masterpiece that you've created. And then it's out, right? And it's like, okay, now it has to do what it's going to do. So that's I don't know that happiness or elation or relief captures any of those feelings, but I know that a culmination of that is probably how I feel.
Yeah. And I want those that are watching to understand the Herculean effort in which you put in to getting this book done now, because our original release schedule wasn't until October.
Yes.
And so we had a conversation, I think it was probably maybe the last week of April, where we're like, we need to do this now. And it is July 15th. So in terms of like expediting a timeline, this is a really kind of crazy, quick timeline. And without sacrificing a single thing, because it is an absolute thing of beauty. Obviously, I'm biased because, PYP is the publisher and all, but clearly I'm biased to all of your work. But I love days like this. And I love that we're actually having this conversation on the launch day, because so often we're having conversations like, oh, the book came out last week, the book's coming out next week. But like, we are here right in the middle of all of the book launch jitters, if you will, because I'm sure, you've been up since 4 a.m. There's a million things going on. So yes. But I know that Jen and I want to talk to you today about the book itself and around kind of like the intention with this book, how you're hoping to impact people with it. And Jen and I are just going to kind of go rogue with a whole litany of questions, because that's how we operate, as you know, because you were a guest on this unnamed show. I think that's like maybe last month. It wasn't that long ago. You were here talking to us about your work as well. So Jen, I'm going to throw it over to you to ask the first hard-hitting question that's kind of on your mind.
Yes. Thanks, Jen. And Maysa, congratulations again. I don't want to gloss over it. It's a really big deal to be sitting here today of all days with you. And we all know the mixed feelings, but the most important thing is this is out in the world, and it's going to have so much impact that you can't even imagine sitting here right now. So it's just really profound to share this moment with you. So so I have a question. I just want to read some of the chapter titles in this book for people to give our audience a sense of what you're covering, because it's important and provocative, and I think very much on point. The first chapter is white trauma. Then there's deconstructing whiteness, white guilt, white savior, unpacking white women as allies, and pursuit of racial justice. And you talk about something called the equity broker, which I think is fascinating. So that's a lot, but I just want to locate people in terms of what this book is about. It's a lot of things that we talk about. I know I talk about endlessly. And that I think we're very much at the beginning of our learning journey about what all these things mean. So your book is going to really help people clue in a time of a lot of uncertainty about what do I do? What's going to have the most impact? What if I'm uncomfortable, but I know I have to do it anyway? What am I not seeing in myself that I need to see? And really getting real with ourselves about our voice for change. And so I know you talk a lot about intention versus impact, and maybe I thought we could start there. What is that dichotomy, and how do we get stuck in that framework? And what do you recommend in order to kind of break out of that into real impact that makes a difference?
Yeah. I mean, I think highlighting what you said in terms of everyone coming into this realization, this awakening about the racial unrest in this country, is, what we can't take for granted is that everyone's at a different starting point. And one of the things that, Jenn and the publishing team and the editors and I went back and forth about is making sure that we captured people who were in different parts of their allyship process. Because I think that we can make assumptions that, you already understand allyship. We can make assumptions that you already understand the different variables that need to be dealt with and brought to the conscious level that comes along with your whiteness. And I didn't want to make those assumptions. I think the beauty about the book is that if you already had a point of acknowledgement and you're dealing with your privilege and you're figuring out how you want to better be in community with communities of color and with people of color, then you can go right into how to pursue racial justice, right? You can skip over that. Like, that's the beauty and the dynamic aspect of being part of this process. But if you don't, I am a believer that you do repeat history. And if you don't understand history in terms of how we got here, then we will be in a perpetual cycle of repeating that history in different ways. It will manifest itself differently, but when you unpack it to the core, the history remains the same, right? And so that was really at least my intention in terms of the impact that I wanted to have. But, I love this. And I was telling you guys earlier that I've been toying around with this idea of, when do we sit in intention and not move to impact? And with this process of allyship, it's very easy to sit in intention for a really long time. I intend to do well. I'm a well-intended white person. I have good intentions. I can fill in all the blanks before and after the word intention. And we can sit in intention and be idle forever, right? What this book does is that it challenges you to think about how to activate that intention. So if you do have an intention, how do you move that intention to impact? And then it gives you a clear guide. One of the things that I'm most proud of is the development of the allyship identity model, because it allows you to sort of clarify where you are in transition of this model and to be able to be authentic in being in one of those stages. And to think about, do I want to stay in this stage? Do I have characteristics of stage 1 and stage 2? And perhaps I'm ready to move to stage 2. And how do I want to identify? The key word around the model is identity. Allyship is an identity. It's not a trend. It's not something that happened yesterday, but not today. It's something that you have to live by and exercise. And it's the spirit by which you want to show up in this world.
I think framing it in the context of an identity is so incredibly powerful, because everything that you just said is completely spot on. Like, it's not something that you can just kind of like dip your toe in one day, like, oh, today I want to be an ally. Today I'm going to speak up for some injustice that I saw. But, tomorrow I'm just tired. I'm not in the mood. I'm not going to, like, it has to be like a full embodiment of that word in everything that you do, and every injustice that you see, whether it's something small or something absolutely huge. Like, we, as Jenn and I, at least sitting here as white women, like, it's our responsibility to speak up when something is not right. And so often I think they just don't know where they fall in this. So I love that there's a model and kind of a framework around this for people to be like, okay, I'm here. I know I need to get here, but I don't really know how I'm gonna go from one to the other. And this book is really kind of giving such tactical steps that they can take toward that. And I know, Jenn, you're always talking about just different, like, allyship in many, many different regards too, in terms of like a continuum. Jenn, what are you taking away, I guess, or seeing as such strong potential for people to be starting in one place and really having this book and everyone's work just kind of moving them closer to actually seeing some change, like, and making an impact, going back to the question?
Well, but that's what we really have to keep our eye on the prize, right? It's real change. But I think, yeah, I love Maysa. Maysa and I are so aligned as ever to think about what is the right next step. And if the next step looks different depending on where we are in our journey. And I would never throw someone in the deep end that doesn't have the muscle built that they need, because I don't want people to get hurt and I don't want them to hurt others. And so I think that the process of growing that ally muscle is a stumbling forward. It is a one step forward, two steps back. It's getting it wrong and getting feedback and going back and doing it again and trying it differently, right? I always think of the book Growth Mindset by Carol Dweck, which is about failing forward. You know, it's a principle that we're very familiar with in the business world. And yet when it comes to the concept of diversity and inclusion and allyship, we're very hard on ourselves. We have to show up perfectly or not at all. And I think that's an element of white supremacy culture, which I've been studying lately. Perfectionism is the number one hallmark of white supremacy culture. And I think it's really interesting that a lot of allies don't make a move because they don't want to be imperfect.
Yeah.
And we can't be afraid of that because it's going to be imperfect. It's going to stumble. It's going to wobble. It's going to, we're going to mess up, and we have to expect that. And I think one of the ways I do that for myself is to say disclaimers all the time. I'll say, like, I am learning this. I am endeavoring to do this. I may not get this right. Here is my intent, but I am very open and seeking information on my impact.
Yeah.
And so we need to literally be like calibrating with people all the time to say, like, did that have the desired impact? That's the only way we're going to learn. And I think it's fascinating, Maysa, because what we're getting back right now, realistically, is fatigue.
Yes.
From the very people we are trying to ally for are like, I don't want to have this conversation right now. You go do the work. Come back to me when you're done. You know, come back to me when you have some competency built. And I think that's a really important factor too to consider is in the absence of feedback, and can you still do the work effectively that you need to do as a white person? It's sort of a question for you. I wondered if you mulled that over as you were writing.
Yeah, I mean, the beauty about being in the space that I'm in is that I have like so many colleagues that, you know, are in my genre of work. As you guys know, when you're, you know, in the publishing world or in the diversity world, you create your village. And I have like my sisters and my brothers in this work that we talk to each other all the time, right? And it's like, you know, I just had a wonderful conversation with a colleague and a friend this past week, and she was just saying, you know, like people, like Black folks are just tired. Like they're tired. They don't want to have to talk about. They don't have, but like they're just trying to survive. So imagine having to now sit there and educate, you know, white people around what this process is going to look like for them, and everyone having a different starting point, a different worldview, a different upbringing, a different way of managing race talk. You know, so going and having to sit through that is an energy sap at best, right? If not like just another monumental thing that has to be carried. So I think that for a lot of, you know, POCs where this book is going to be critical is to say, look, I've got a really good colleague that spent a lot of time doing many years of research, because by the way, while like Jenn said, we sped this up, you know, from a fall, winter / possibly even 2021 release to like today, and got this done in like 6 weeks. This work really started at the tail end of Urban Trauma. And Jenn, I don't know if you remember this, right? You remember, and so Urban Trauma, which was my first book that came out with 3 parts, had a 4th part, which was about allyship. And the publishing team was like, nope, take it out. Take it out. They took my entire thing out, Jenn Brown. Can you believe that? You know, what? Like as an author, you know, that's a blow to the ego. We're like, what's wrong with my chapter, right? And they had to like talk me off the ledge. But I think what was so important is that as we talked about it, we wanted Urban Trauma to be a piece for people of color, and in particular for Black people in this country who couldn't identify and understand how race-based trauma was manifesting in themselves and what that pain looked like. And it didn't fit to talk about allyship in that space. That space needed to be sacred, right? And now, so that was back in 2017. So this work around allyship, I already was, you can tell by my intention in creating a 4th part to the urban trauma book that I knew the importance of talking to white allies in terms of what they needed to do as the next step, right? And so this was the natural build out. This was now like, let's take this and really flesh it out. And then COVID hit, and then, you know, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, you know, it was just like one thing after another, you know, Ahmaud Arbery, and it was time. It was here. And so that was, you know, that's how it all came to fruition.
So in terms of, oh, go ahead, Jen. Oh, oh, I see. There's a visitor behind her.
There's a visitor.
So I know that like some of the things that we've talked about is, you know, like people have had the time to kind of fumble through their missteps and their faults and like being on this journey and not really knowing what to do, how to do it, and just kind of like really, I think fumble is probably the best word for it, because people do have good intentions, but that does not mean they come out the way in which they intend them. And so is there a particular area in the book that kind of addresses, you know, like how do they maybe recalibrate themselves? Because like now, like we were talking, like this is where the rubber meets the road, right? So like now's the time, like we've had our time to fumble through this, to screw things up, to misspeak, to say something that we thought was actually supportive and really it was really insensitive. Like there's just a lot of stuff like that. Is there any particular thing that kind of comes to you that someone could be like it just kind of giving them that like aha moment of like, now I know what I need to do because I've had my time to screw this up. Like now is the time, like that is now the past. Like we now have to move forward.
Yeah, I mean, we learn from our mistakes, right? You know, Henry Ford said that failure is just another opportunity to do it better, you know, to do it again better, something like that, right? And so I think that we have to accept perpetual failure in this space, you know, and I think that, you know, what Jenn was talking about in terms of fumbling and in terms of not being perfect at this is going to be so important, and seeking out the right support at each fumble. You know, and that may be sometimes a person of color who's willing to sit down. You know, for example, my advocacy comes in being able to educate and teach. So I'm not tired. You know, I don't feel the weight of the world. In fact, I get energized by this. I can't speak to everyone. Some people, it's going to be the protests. Other people are going to be initiatives and programs. Other folks are going to be, you know, just trying to maintain their sanity and their own mental wellness. So everyone has something different. So if there are questions, if there's a fumble, what I am challenging as a call to action is be authentic. If you have a question, ask it. Don't sit with that question and then, you know, talk to somebody who isn't in the allyship process that gives you feedback that is either going to support a narrative that you have that might be untrue. You know, so go speak to a more advanced ally, you know, reach out to Jenn Brown, reach out to you, Jen Grace, you know, and say, you know, you all have been in this work for a while. What happens if, for example, I put out a corporate statement around, you know, the racial unrest and what my company is ready and prepared to do about this, but I've done nothing ever since. Mm-hmm. Right? That's the fumble. Yep. The fumble is I was quick to make sure that I reacted. I was quick to make sure I responded. I put out a strong statement. How do I back that now? That's how you have to continue, right? So like all of us who read those statements are anticipating and waiting the call to action, the next action step, right? Mm-hmm. What happens if I am part of a table where an initiative is ensuing, you know, redesigning of law enforcement, and there are no social services agencies of color around the table? Mm-hmm. Well, if I'm an ally, I say, we need to invite every single social service, mental health, you know, nonprofit ran by people of color onto this table. And not only am I willing to advocate for that, because that's what the advocate role is in that stage, but as an equity broker, I will give up my seat if necessary to make sure that that voice is around this table, right? That's the process of learning. That's the process of pushing beyond the fumble when you can, and when you're able to back that up. So that would be for me, how you move beyond the fumble.
I love that so much. And I think what you're saying, like in so many ways, I think that, and I feel like I've seen just memes and things of people like, oh, you know, you have to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. But I think when it comes to allyship, you have to really be okay with being called out when you make a misstep, and not taking it personal and taking it as a learning lesson, an opportunity to say like, all right, like I really have the best intention here, but I did not realize that what I said had some kind of baked in racism to it. I didn't realize that that expression that I used was whatever it is. And just being okay with somebody being like, yeah, like that is not okay and that is wrong. And then you taking that and being like, noted. And now I'm going to make sure that I teach others what I just learned too. Exactly. But I think also what you're saying of like being willing to give up your seat, like that is such an uncomfortable position for people to say, like, I worked really hard to get my seat at this table, but I'm willing to give it up as a result to make sure that someone else's voice is not being heard at this moment. And I think that can be really, really difficult for people. But again, it's like you need to move your own ego aside, because this is bigger than you as one individual. It's like so much more of a community type of effort for so many different people.
But I think even inherent in what you're saying, it's so important, right? Because I believe that the way that we as humans, regardless of the racial construct, you know, because, you know, race is a construct that we have used in our society to leverage, right? Different privileges based on skin color. And I think that the interesting part about this is that everything is seen like a pie. Like, really, are you asking me to give up my piece of the pie here? You know, and what I'm saying is that this is not a pie. We're not slicing, you know, what belongs to you and what belongs to me. If we're really going to engage in the process of allyship and beyond, because this is really, you know, we can debate on a whole nother segment about what allyship means. And, you know, while the book is called, it's called Beyond Ally for a reason. And so the most important part is to see it that this is a partnership. So you're not giving up anything, right? Instead, what you're saying is like, let me evaluate how I got here and perhaps what opportunities were afforded to me because of my privilege. How am I the benefactor, you know, generationally of being positioned to be here? And how can I then support the partnership with a person of color, a community of color, a organization of color, you know? And that's really the question, not what am I giving up, but who am I willing to partner with, elevate and lift, so that I am having to use my power and privilege to support how, you know, these communities of color can manifest what they need to heal themselves, right? Like, I think that that's the difference versus like me dictating what it is that they need to be healed. Yeah.
That's so true. So good. So good, Maysa. There's a question in the comment about the moral superiority dance from one white activist to another, which is fascinating, right? It's like, well, I'm a better ally, like, you know, look at me. And I think there's a gendered aspect to this too, if I may, as a white woman, like looking at like the white men that are really, really acknowledging their proximity to power. And it's not even proximity, it's actual power. It's like in the power. I'm proximate to power. They are the power. And so seeing somebody like that really not make it about themselves and decentering themselves and sharing their platform and like, you know, making sure the voices are at the table and that they take a back seat, given how powerful our society has deemed them. That is the really beautiful thing to witness. And I try to make sure I witness that often so that I can have the hope I need to continue to do this work, because that's why I invest so much in men's communities. And I'm watching very carefully how men are articulating this, because many men are going to be looking at other men, and white men will look at white men, and they will follow if the world doesn't end when true allyship and beyond allyship is exhibited.
Yeah.
We need more examples of what that looks like so that we can all norm to a new model. That's what we really need. And people need those examples to understand that it's doable, and that actually it looks incredibly beautiful when it's done in an authentic, decentering way. The sharing of power is not it's not, the pie isn't finite. It's actually endlessly expanding, and 1 + 1 = 3. And you're not giving up anything to admit that you don't know the answers and you're going to get things wrong, and you're going to do your best. Like, I just wish even just that, to hear people talk about that openly and publicly, especially senior people, would be an incredible example for us to follow.
I think, as we're kind of wrapping this up, one of the things that was most important to me is, in the process of writing this book, those that considered themselves allies, how would they step up, right? And how here I am writing about allyship, and then I was challenged along the way in terms of seeing like who truly, despite self-definition, stepped up to the plate and took the risk that needed to be taken to ally with me in this process, right? And not everyone did, and then some incredible people did, right? Like, and that was like sort of like the juxtaposing of all of this, right? And I had to deal with that. And I remember having a very emotional moment. I think it was last week, right, Jenn, where I was just like, gosh, it was a realization to me around sometimes the devastating disappointment when someone has proclaimed to be an ally and then they don't deliver for you, and then at the same time, like, like good and bad all at the same time, like, right. And then at the same time, like the ones that were like texting and making sure like things were getting out and getting interviews done. And, even Justin Tanter, who wrote my forward, like delivering that in the middle of like songwriting and doing all this other, stuff that he was doing. And he said, and even acknowledging where he has failed. The most powerful conversation that I had with him before he wrote the forward was like, I need to acknowledge where I have failed as an ally. And he's like, that's how I want to position this forward. And I'm like, do it, because he had considered himself, as a member of the LGBTQI community, right? Like, it's like, here I am as a queer male, and like, I define myself as an ally. And then I read your book and I'm like, all right, let me take 3 steps back and then figure out.
Forward is so powerful. I had full body chills reading the forward when it came in. Like, it so encapsulates everything that your book is setting out to do in the world right now. And I'm so excited that we are here partnering with you on your second book, because it's just so amazing. And for anyone who's been watching this, because we've had people coming in and out this whole time, that, the book's available pretty much wherever you can buy a book, support whatever bookstore you are going for. Right now, we're going for Amazon bestselling status. We're going for New York Times. Like, we are trying to like really come out of the gate strong with this book. So if there is any way that you can support this book, of course, as I will continue to say, I am biased. I absolutely love and adore Maysa on a personal level, but of course, as a PYP product in conjunction with Maysa and her team, it's just so important to have this book. And I want to be like the Mary Poppins, where I just sprinkle your book out to everybody that I meet, to be like, okay, like, we've had a conversation, because I get into conversations just like Jenn, I get into heated debates on a pretty regular basis around allyship and all of the things. And so it's just a great tool for people. So even if you feel like you are already kind of at that extreme end of an ally, and you feel like your work, like, the work is never done. Like, I feel like I'm a hardcore ally, and yet there's always something that we can learn. But if you feel like you're in that position where you are far to an extreme on the ally continuum, you still like take this as an opportunity to bring it into your book club, to give it to a friend, to buy it for a family member, especially those family members that maybe just now dabbling into like, oh, wow, this is something I should be paying attention to. And they are genuinely at the very, very beginning of this journey. But that's the beauty of this book, is that anyone, regardless of where you are on this journey, you can pick it up and you can learn something from it. So I encourage people to use it as a tool to give to other people, even if you feel like yourself, you don't actually need it.
That's right.
Hear, hear.
Thank
Totally.
you guys. You're amazing.
Have a great day.
Thank
We know
you.
you're busy.
Yes.
Enjoy it.
Enjoy
Enjoy it.
today, I'm sure. So yes, please, go ahead, go get the book today. We're trying to launch, do some awesome stuff. Name of the book is being asked is Beyond Ally: The Pursuit of Racial Justice. You can put it in and just even put Dr. Maysa Akbar next to it, and voila, the book will come up. And Maysa's website is at the bottom, scrolling along as well. Beautiful. Thank you all.
Guys.
Thank you all.
So
So good to
excited.
connect with you.
Yes.